In a world where pain and loneliness often go unseen, animals remind us of something powerful: that love, loyalty, and courage can come from the most unexpected places. The Pacific winds carried the scent of salt and seaweed as they swept across the Oregon coastline. David Foster gripped his daughter Emma's hand tightly as they walked along the rocky beach, their 3 golden retrievers bounding ahead through the morning mist. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind scattered driftwood and tangled kelp across the sand. It was early March, and the ocean still held winter's chill. David had promised Emma they would search for interesting shells and sea glass before the tourist season began. Their 3 dogs, Max, Bailey, and Cooper, seemed to have their own agenda, racing toward the tide pools with unbridled enthusiasm. Max, the oldest at 8 years, suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked forward, body rigid with attention. Bailey and Cooper immediately responded to their leader's alert, falling into formation behind him. David noticed the change in behavior instantly. After years of working as a marine biologist, he had learned to read animal body language with precision. Emma tugged on her father's jacket. "Dad, what's wrong with the dogs?" Before David could answer, Max let out a low whine and began trotting purposefully toward a cluster of large rocks near the waterline. The other 2 dogs followed, their usual playful energy replaced by something more serious, more protective. David and Emma hurried after them, navigating the slippery rocks with care. As they rounded a large boulder, they saw what had captured the dogs' attention. Wedged between 2 rocks, barely above the waterline, lay a tiny harbor seal pup. Its gray-spotted fur was matted with sand and blood, and its dark eyes blinked weakly against the morning light. "Oh no," Emma gasped, starting forward, but David caught her shoulder. "Wait, honey. Let me check first." The seal pup was smaller than it should have been, probably only a few weeks old. David knelt carefully, assessing the situation with professional detachment, even as his heart ached at the sight. The pup's breathing was shallow and labored. There were wounds on its flippers, likely from being battered against the rocks during the storm, and its body temperature felt dangerously low even through his gloves. What surprised David most was the dog's behavior. Max approached the seal pup with extraordinary gentleness, lowering his head to sniff carefully, instead of barking or showing any sign of aggression toward what would normally trigger their prey drive. The golden retriever began licking the pup's head with tender, deliberate strokes. Bailey and Cooper pressed close, their large bodies forming a protective barrier against the wind. "Is it going to die?" Emma's voice trembled. David looked around, searching for any sign of the mother seal. Harbor seals typically stayed close to their pups, but the beach was empty except for a few seagulls. He noticed drag marks in the sand leading from farther up the beach, suggesting the pup had been separated from its mother during the storm and had struggled to reach the water. As a marine biologist, David knew the protocols. Federal law protected marine mammals. You weren't supposed to touch them, let alone take them from the beach. But he also knew that leaving this pup here meant certain death. The morning temperature was barely above freezing, and the pup was clearly hypothermic and injured. David pulled out his phone to call the Marine Mammal Stranding Network. But there was no signal. The remote stretch of beach was notorious for poor cell coverage. He tried again, walking to higher ground, but still nothing. "Dad?" Emma looked at him with those eyes that always reminded him of her mother, Jennifer, full of compassion and hope. David made a decision. He removed his heavy jacket and carefully wrapped it around the seal pup. The animal barely reacted, which confirmed how critical its condition was. A healthy seal pup would have bitten and struggled. "We're taking her home," he said firmly. "Mom will know what to do." The journey back to their beach house took 15 minutes, with David cradling the wrapped seal pup against his chest, while Emma walked ahead with the dogs. Max stayed close to David's side, looking up frequently at the bundle, while Bailey and Cooper flanked Emma protectively. Jennifer Foster was in her home office reviewing case files when they burst through the door. As a veterinarian specializing in exotic animals, she had treated everything from parrots to pythons, but she had never worked with a marine mammal. Her first reaction was concern, then professional focus. "David, you know we can't just—" "I know," he interrupted. "But there was no cell signal, and she was dying. I'll call Noah as soon as we stabilize her." Jennifer's trained eyes assessed the situation quickly. She cleared her examination table, and David gently unwrapped the seal pup. In the bright light of the office, the extent of the injuries became clear. Multiple lacerations, severe dehydration, hypothermia, and possible internal injuries from being thrown against rocks. "Emma, get me the thermal blankets from the supply closet." "David, start warming water for subcutaneous fluids. We need to raise her core temperature slowly." For the next 3 hours, the Foster household became an emergency marine mammal hospital. Jennifer worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning wounds, administering antibiotics, and setting up a makeshift incubator using heating pads and blankets. The seal pup, which Jennifer determined was female and approximately 3 weeks old, remained dangerously still throughout the treatment. "Her chances aren't good," Jennifer admitted quietly as she listened to the pup's heartbeat. "She's severely malnourished. Even if she survives the night, there could be complications we can't see." They set up a large plastic pool lined with towels in the mudroom, the warmest room in the house. Jennifer placed the seal pup inside, surrounded by carefully positioned heating elements to maintain a stable temperature. She explained to Emma that the pup needed rest and quiet. Then they all retreated to the kitchen. But the 3 golden retrievers had other ideas. Max approached the mudroom door and sat down, refusing to move when David called him. Bailey and Cooper joined their pack leader, forming a vigil outside the door. "They know she needs protection," Emma whispered. That night, despite explicit instructions to leave the seal pup undisturbed, Jennifer got up at 2 a.m. to check on their patient. What she found made her call for David immediately. The mudroom door had been nudged open, something they discovered the latch hadn't fully caught. Inside, the 3 dogs had arranged themselves in a careful circle around the pool. Max lay with his head resting on the edge, his warm breath washing over the seal pup. Bailey had positioned himself against one side, his body heat radiating toward the makeshift nest. Cooper guarded the other side, alert and watchful, and in the center the seal pup was breathing more strongly, her dark eyes open and focused on Max's gentle face. "They've been keeping her warm," Jennifer said in amazement, "providing constant heat and comfort all night." Over the next few days, the seal pup, whom Emma had named Ripley after the brave character in her favorite movie, began to show signs of recovery. She started taking formula from a bottle, initially reluctant but gradually accepting the nourishment. Her wounds began to heal under Jennifer's careful treatment, and her body temperature stabilized. But something else was happening. Something that made David pause his work to document it carefully. Ripley was beginning to imitate the dogs. It started subtly. When Max sat by the pool, Ripley would prop herself up on her front flippers, mimicking his posture as closely as her body would allow. When Bailey made his characteristic happy huffing sound, Ripley would respond with a similar vocalization, though her seal voice gave it a strange barking quality. By the end of the first week, the changes became more pronounced. Ripley would become excited when she heard the dog's tags jingling, anticipating their visits. She learned to recognize Emma's voice and would wiggle toward the edge of the pool when called, just as the dogs came when summoned. David, with his scientific background, found the behavior fascinating and concerning in equal measure. He began keeping detailed notes, filming the interactions, and researching similar cases in marine mammal literature. What he found was limited. There were documented cases of cross-species bonding, but nothing quite like what he was witnessing. The most remarkable change came 2 weeks into Ripley's recovery. The seal pup had regained enough strength to move around more freely, and Jennifer had created a larger enclosure in their converted garage, complete with a small pool and a dry area. One morning, Emma came running into the house, breathless with excitement. "Dad, Mom, you have to see this." In the garage, they found Ripley attempting to walk on her flippers in the same manner the dogs walked on their legs. It was awkward and inefficient, completely contrary to the natural seal locomotion of pulling forward with front flippers while dragging the body, but Ripley was determinedly trying to keep her belly off the ground, moving in a rocking motion that mimicked quadrupedal movement. Max stood nearby, tail wagging encouragement, as if coaching his unusual pupil. "This is extraordinary," David breathed, already reaching for his camera. "She's learning movement patterns from observing the dogs." As March turned to April, Ripley's integration into the family became complete in her mind, if not in reality. She ate when the dogs ate, slept when they slept, and became noticeably distressed when separated from them. When Max barked at a delivery truck, Ripley would add her own seal version of a bark, a loud rhythmic sound that was part bark, part seal call. The most endearing development was her attempt to play fetch. Emma would throw a ball into the pool and the dogs would watch with interest from the edge. Ripley would dive after it, retrieve it in her mouth and bring it back to the edge, dropping it just as she had seen the dogs do countless times. Her reward was enthusiastic licking from Max and praise from Emma, which seemed to be exactly what she wanted. Jennifer monitored Ripley's health meticulously. The seal pup was gaining weight appropriately. Her wounds had healed completely, and her strength had returned. Physically, she was ready to be released. Behaviorally, she was becoming more dog than seal. "We need to call Noah," Jennifer said one evening after Emma had gone to bed. "We've been putting it off, but legally we should have reported this weeks ago." David nodded reluctantly. He had been documenting everything, creating a comprehensive case study of Ripley's development. Part of him wanted to share this remarkable story with the scientific community. Part of him dreaded what would happen when authorities became involved. "I know," he said quietly. "I'll call tomorrow." But Emma made the decision for them. In her innocence and pride in their unusual family member, she had been posting videos of Ripley on her social media account. What started as shares with a few school friends quickly went viral. "Seal who thinks she's a dog" became an overnight sensation. By the time David made his official call to Noah, his phone was already ringing with their number displayed. The Marine Mammal Protection Office had been alerted by dozens of messages from people who had seen Emma's videos. Officer Sarah Chen arrived at the foster home 3 days later. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a firm demeanor. She carried a thick folder of regulations and a portable laptop loaded with marine mammal databases. David and Jennifer met her at the door, preparing for confrontation, but Officer Chen surprised them by asking to observe Ripley first before discussing anything else. They spent an hour in the garage, watching Ripley interact with the 3 dogs. Officer Chen took notes, recorded video on an official device, and asked detailed questions about Ripley's care, diet, and behavior. She examined Jennifer's medical records and reviewed David's scientific documentation. Finally, she sat down at their kitchen table with a heavy sigh. "This is one of the most remarkable cases I've ever encountered," she began. "Your documentation is thorough and professional. The medical care has been exemplary, and the behavior adaptation is frankly unprecedented in my 20 years with Noah." "But," David prompted, knowing it was coming. "But the Marine Mammal Protection Act is very clear. Harbor seals are federally protected. Keeping one without a permit is illegal regardless of circumstances. Ripley needs to be returned to her natural habitat." Emma, who had been listening from the doorway, burst into tears. "But she doesn't know how to be a seal anymore. She thinks she's a dog." Officer Chen's expression softened. "I understand, sweetheart. But seals are wild animals. They belong in the ocean with their own kind. Over the next 2 weeks, Officer Chen worked with her supervisors, David's documentation, and a team of marine mammal experts to develop a plan. They proposed taking Ripley to a rehabilitation facility where she could be gradually reintroduced to seal behaviors and eventually released. But David argued for a different approach. She's not going to unlearn these behaviors in a facility. She's imprinted on dogs, on our family. Taking her to a facility will traumatize her. After extensive discussions and review of David's research, Noah agreed to a compromise. They would attempt a direct release in a protected cove, approximately 80 miles up the coast, an area known for its harbor seal colony. Ripley would be fitted with a satellite tracking tag so her movements could be monitored. If she integrated with wild seals, the experiment would be considered successful. If she couldn't adapt, they would reassess. The day of separation arrived too quickly. Emma had been crying for days, and even Jennifer's eyes were red. David felt as if they were betraying a member of their family. The 3 dogs sensed something was wrong. Max became unusually subdued, staying close to Ripley's enclosure. Bailey paced nervously, and Cooper whined whenever anyone approached with supplies. Officer Chen arrived with a specialized transport container, a large padded crate designed for marine mammals. As they prepared to move Ripley, the scene became heartbreaking. The seal pup resisted, making distressed vocalizations that sounded heartbreakingly similar to the whining the dogs made when upset. When they finally secured Ripley in the container, Max pressed his nose against the mesh, licking through the gaps. Bailey and Cooper crowded close, both dogs making high-pitched whines of distress. Emma sobbed uncontrollably as Jennifer held her. The drive to the release site took nearly 2 hours. David and Emma rode in Officer Chen's official vehicle while Jennifer followed in their car with the 3 dogs. The dogs had refused to stay home, and Jennifer couldn't bear to leave them behind. The release cove was beautiful, a protected inlet with rocky shores and clear, deep water. A small harbor seal colony rested on the rocks in the distance, about 30 seals of various ages. Officer Chen explained that this was an ideal location, with plenty of fish and established seal presence. They carried Ripley's container to a flat rock near the water's edge. Officer Chen checked the satellite tag one final time, ensuring it was properly attached to Ripley's fur with marine-grade adhesive. The tag was small but sophisticated, capable of transmitting location data for up to 6 months. "Once we open this, you need to step back," Officer Chen instructed. "We want her to enter the water on her own terms." David nodded, pulling Emma close. Jennifer held the dog's leashes firmly, though Max strained toward the container, clearly understanding that Ripley was inside. Officer Chen opened the latch. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Ripley emerged slowly, blinking in the bright coastal sunlight. She looked around, saw the ocean, then turned and looked back at the humans and dogs. Her dark eyes found Max, and she made a sound, that unique vocalization that was part seal call, part dog whine. Max pulled against his leash, answering with his own whine. Ripley took a hesitant step toward them, but Officer Chen moved between them, creating a barrier. "No contact," she said firmly but not unkindly. "She needs to choose the ocean." For several agonizing minutes, Ripley remained on the rock, looking between the ocean and her family. Emma buried her face in her mother's jacket, unable to watch. Then a sound from the water drew Ripley's attention. Another seal, a young female, had swum closer, curious about the newcomer. Ripley's wild instincts, dormant but not erased, awakened. She turned toward the water, her movements becoming more fluid, more natural. With a grace that surprised everyone who had watched her awkward attempts to walk like a dog, Ripley slipped into the ocean. She surfaced once, 20 feet from shore, and looked back. David would swear for the rest of his life that their eyes met in that moment, a final acknowledgement passing between them. Then she dove, and the ocean swallowed her. The drive home was silent except for Emma's quiet crying. The three dogs sat in the back of Jennifer's car, noses pressed to the windows, looking back toward the coast even as it disappeared from view. At home, the dogs refused to enter the house. They sat on the deck overlooking the beach, ears perked, eyes scanning the horizon. Max maintained his vigil through the night, and David found him in the same spot the next morning, still waiting. Officer Chen had given them access to a website where they could track Ripley's satellite data. Emma checked it every hour, watching the small blue dot that represented their seal pup moving through the ocean. Initially, the data was encouraging. Ripley stayed near the release cove, presumably interacting with the local seal colony. She dove to appropriate depths for feeding and surfaced at regular intervals. The behavioral patterns matched those of wild harbor seals. David felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe she's adapting better than we thought. But on the third day, the pattern changed. Ripley began moving, not in the random foraging pattern of a seal exploring territory, but in a deliberate direction, south, toward home. Jennifer noticed it first, plotting the coordinates on a marine chart. "David, look at this trajectory." They spread the chart across their dining table, marking Ripley's positions over the past 12 hours. The line was nearly straight, following the coastline southward. "She's not foraging," David said, his heart beginning to pound. "She's traveling with purpose." Over the next several days, they watched the blue dot move steadily along the coast. Ripley would stop periodically, presumably to rest and eat, but she always resumed the same southward bearing. She was averaging about 10 miles per day, a remarkable pace for a young seal. Officer Chen called on the 5th day. "We're seeing unusual movement patterns. Has your family been in contact with the seal?" "No," David answered honestly. "We're watching the tracking data. She's heading south." There was a long pause. "Seals don't migrate like this. Not this young, and not in this pattern. She's following the coastline almost exactly." "She's coming home," Emma said from where she had been listening. "Ripley's trying to find us." David wanted to dismiss it as wishful thinking, but the data supported Emma's conclusion. The trajectory, if continued, would bring Ripley directly to their stretch of beach. The three dogs seemed to sense something, too. Max's vigil intensified. He barely ate, spending nearly all his time on the deck, watching the ocean. Bailey and Cooper took turns sitting with him, the pack maintaining their watch. On the 7th day, Ripley encountered her first major obstacle. The tracking data showed her approaching a stretch of coast, known for its rocky cliffs and dangerous currents. Most seals would have gone farther out to sea to avoid it. Ripley stopped at the edge of this area for nearly 6 hours. David and Jennifer stayed up all night, watching the blue dot, willing it to move. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, emotionally exhausted from days of anxiety. At dawn, the dot moved. Ripley had found a way through, navigating channels between the rocks that only a seal could manage. She emerged on the other side and continued south. "She's problem-solving," David said in awe, planning her route like the dogs would plan a path through difficult terrain. On the 9th day, Ripley faced her most dangerous challenge. The tracking data showed her entering an area marked on marine charts as prime white shark habitat. April was peak season for juvenile great whites hunting seals along this stretch of coast. The dot stopped moving. For 12 agonizing hours, Ripley's position remained static. David called Officer Chen. "Is the tag malfunctioning?" "It's transmitting normally," Chen replied, her voice tense. "But she's not moving. Could be resting. Could be injured. Could be... we don't know. Could be dead," David completed the sentence in his mind. "Taken by a shark or orca. Her brief life ended in pursuit of a family she would never reach." Jennifer tried to prepare Emma for the worst, but she refused to believe Ripley was gone. Max would know, she insisted, pointing to where the golden retriever still maintained his vigil. He'd know if something bad happened. As if responding to his name, Max suddenly stood, his tail beginning to wag slowly. Bailey and Cooper rose as well, their attention focused on something beyond human perception. An hour later, the tracking dot moved. Ripley had been waiting, whether for the tide, for better conditions, or for sharks to pass, they would never know. But she was alive and moving south again. The pattern became clear over the next few days. Ripley was learning to navigate as she traveled, adapting to obstacles, avoiding dangers, resting when necessary, and always maintaining that southward bearing. She passed through areas with heavy boat traffic by traveling at night. She avoided a sea lion rookery by going around it through deeper water. She found fish abundant enough to maintain her strength. By day 13, David's calculations showed Ripley was approximately 30 miles from their beach. At her current pace, she would arrive in 3 to 4 days. "What do we do when she gets here?" Jennifer asked. "Officer Chen will take her away again. Then we fight for her," David said firmly. "We document everything. We show that Ripley is making an informed choice. She's not a confused animal acting on instinct. She's choosing her family." Officer Chen called that evening. "Mr. Foster, we need to discuss contingency plans. If that seal reaches your property, we'll need to retrieve her immediately." "And take her where?" David challenged. "Farther away, to a facility. She's traveling 80 miles through dangerous waters to get home. Doesn't that tell you something about where she belongs?" "It tells me she's an animal with unusual learned behaviors that don't serve her survival in the wild." "Then maybe she's not meant to survive in the wild," David argued. "Maybe she's supposed to be with us." The conversation ended without resolution, but Officer Chen promised to consult with her supervisors and marine mammal behavior experts. On day 15, disaster struck. The tracking signal disappeared. David was reviewing the latest data when the blue dot suddenly vanished from the screen. He refreshed the page frantically, but the system showed no new data. The last recorded position was approximately 20 miles north of their beach, near a stretch of coast known for its seal caves and tide pools. He immediately called Officer Chen, who confirmed the signal loss. Could be equipment failure, damage to the tag, or... She didn't finish, but David heard the possibility. Death. Within hours, David and Jennifer were in their car driving north with the 3 dogs. If Ripley was in trouble, if she was stranded or injured, they needed to find her. Officer Chen agreed to meet them there with emergency equipment. They searched for 2 days. David and Officer Chen coordinated with local volunteers, Coast Guard, and other marine mammal response teams. They explored every beach, cove, and tide pool along a 10-mile stretch of coastline. The dogs helped, Max especially seeming to understand the urgency, sniffing carefully along the waterline. But there was no sign of Ripley, no body washed ashore, no injured seal in the caves. Nothing. Emma was devastated. She was so close. She almost made it home. That night, they returned to their house, exhausted and heartbroken. Jennifer made dinner, though no one was hungry. David sat at the computer, staring at the blank tracking screen, hoping against hope that the signal would reappear. The 3 dogs had resumed their vigil on the deck, but something was different. Max was standing now perfectly still, his nose lifted to the wind. His tail began to move, just slightly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Bailey and Cooper flanked him, both dogs suddenly alert, focused on the dark beach below. Max barked. It was a specific bark, the welcome home bark he used when family members returned after an absence. David's heart leaped. He ran to the deck, Jennifer and Emma right behind him. The moon was bright enough to illuminate the beach, casting silver light across the sand and rock. At first, David saw nothing. Then, movement near the waterline. A shape pulled itself from the waves onto the sand, unmistakably seal-shaped but moving with determined purpose toward the path that led up to their house. Emma screamed with joy. Ripley. The three dogs erupted in excited barking, straining against the deck railing. David grabbed flashlights, and the family ran down the wooden stairs to the beach. Ripley was there, soaking wet, smaller than David remembered, with no satellite tag visible on her back. She had pulled herself halfway across the beach, moving in that awkward land locomotion of seals, but her destination was clear. When she saw the dogs racing toward her, Ripley made that sound, the unique vocalization that was part seal, part dog. Max reached her first, and the reunion was a tangle of wet fur, excited barks, and seal calls. Bailey and Cooper joined in, all three dogs carefully gentle despite their enthusiasm, licking Ripley's face and nuzzling her body. Emma dropped to her knees in the sand, wrapping her arms around the seal pup. "You came home. You really came home." Jennifer examined Ripley quickly by flashlight. The seal was thinner than when they had released her, exhausted from her journey, and the satellite tag was missing, likely torn off by rocks or during passage through a narrow space. But she was alive, relatively healthy, and she was home. David looked up to see Officer Chen standing at the top of the path, having followed them when they ran from the house. She was filming the reunion on her phone, her expression unreadable. "This doesn't happen," Chen said as she descended to the beach. "Harbor seals don't navigate 80 miles of open coast to return to a specific location. They don't form this kind of attachment to other species. This isn't normal behavior." "Maybe normal doesn't apply here," Jennifer said, still holding Emma, who clutched Ripley. Officer Chen watched for a long moment as Ripley, exhausted but content, lay surrounded by the three dogs. Max had positioned himself so that Ripley could rest against his warm side. Bailey and Cooper formed a protective barrier, just as they had on that first night when a dying seal pup needed their warmth to survive. "I need to make some calls," Chen said finally. "Don't move her." The next hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and video conferences. Officer Chen contacted her supervisors, who contacted marine mammal experts, who contacted behavioral scientists. David sent his complete documentation. Jennifer provided medical records. Emma's viral videos were reviewed as evidence of Ripley's unusual development. As dawn broke over the Pacific, Officer Chen returned to where the Foster family sat on the beach with Ripley and the three dogs. "I've been authorized to propose something unprecedented," she began. "There's never been a case quite like this. Ripley has demonstrated navigational abilities and determination that are extraordinary. She's also demonstrated that her behavioral imprinting on your family and dogs is profound and probably irreversible." David held his breath. "NOAA is willing to grant a special educational permit. Ripley can stay with you, provided that your property is modified to meet marine mammal housing standards. You'll need to build a proper enclosure with a saltwater pool, temperature control, and appropriate space. You'll be required to participate in a long-term study on cross-species bonding and behavioral development, and you'll need to conduct educational programs for schools and research institutions." "We'll do it," Jennifer said immediately. "All of it." "There will be regular inspections," Chen continued. "Ripley's health and welfare will be monitored closely. If at any point we determine that her quality of life is compromised, the permit will be revoked." "We understand," David agreed. Emma just hugged Ripley tighter, tears streaming down her face, these tears of joy rather than sorrow. The following months transformed the Foster property. David used his scientific contacts to design a state-of-the-art marine mammal facility that met or exceeded all federal requirements. A large saltwater pool with filtration systems, a dry resting area with climate control, and plenty of space for Ripley to move naturally in both water and land environments. But they also created spaces where Ripley could interact with the dogs safely. Max, Bailey, and Cooper became part of the educational programs, demonstrating the unusual bond that had saved Ripley's life and shaped her development. News of Ripley's journey spread far beyond Emma's social media. Marine biologists came from across the country to study her. Her case was documented in scientific journals. Documentary filmmakers requested access, but through it all, the Foster family protected Ripley's welfare, ensuring that she remained first and foremost a member of their family, not just a curiosity. Ripley thrived. She grew into a healthy adult harbor seal, possessing all the physical capabilities of her wild cousins, but her behavior remained unique. She came when called. She played fetch with Emma and in the pool. She slept curled up next to Max in the special area they had created where dogs and seal could rest together safely. A year after Ripley's remarkable journey home, the Foster family hosted a special event. Scientists, NOAA officials, local students, and media gathered to learn about Ripley's story. David gave a presentation on cross-species bonding and behavioral plasticity. Jennifer discussed the medical aspects of marine mammal care. Emma, now 11, talked about the importance of compassion and how animals can surprise us with their capacity for love and loyalty. But the most powerful moment came when Max, now 9 years old, walked slowly to the edge of Ripley's pool. The seal, fully grown at over 100 pounds, swam to meet him. They touched noses through the pool barrier, the gesture they had shared thousands of times since that first night when a dying seal pup found warmth in a circle of protective dogs. Officer Sarah Chen, who had become a friend to the family and a key supporter of Ripley's permit, stood beside David as they watched the interaction. "You know," she said quietly, "in 20 years with NOAA, I've seen a lot of rescues. Most of them follow predictable patterns. The animal is treated, rehabilitated, and released. Some adapt to the wild, some don't. But I've never seen anything like this." "Like what?" David asked. "An animal choosing its family. Not because it had to, not because it couldn't survive otherwise, but because that's where it wanted to be. Ripley could have stayed in that protected cove. There were fish, other seals, everything a wild harbor seal needs. But she traveled 80 miles through dangerous waters to come home. That's not instinct. That's not conditioning. That's love." David nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. Emma joined them, followed by Bailey and Cooper. Max remained at the poolside and Ripley remained in the water near him, the two of them content in each other's presence. "Do you think she knows she's a seal?" Emma asked. David considered the question carefully. "I think she knows she's Ripley. She knows she lives in water and breathes air. She knows she's different from Max, Bailey, and Cooper. But I also think she knows that those differences don't matter. Family isn't about being the same species. It's about belonging to each other." As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the Foster family sat together on the deck overlooking Ripley's enclosure. The 3 dogs lounged around them, and in the pool below, Ripley floated peacefully, occasionally surfacing to check that her family was still there, still watching, still loving her. Scientists could debate the mechanisms of behavioral imprinting, the limits of cross-species bonding, and the nature versus nurture aspects of Ripley's development. But for the Foster family, the truth was simpler and more profound. They had found each other in a storm, had fought to stay together against regulations and nature itself, and had proven that sometimes love and determination can rewrite even the wildest of fates. Ripley's journey had been extraordinary, covering 80 miles of dangerous ocean, navigating obstacles that should have been impossible for a young seal driven by nothing more than the need to return to her family. It was a journey that defied scientific understanding and challenged assumptions about animal cognition and emotion. But perhaps the most remarkable thing wasn't that Ripley had made the journey. It was that she had known somehow deep in whatever part of a seal's consciousness holds such knowledge, that home wasn't a place or a habitat type. Home was where Max, Bailey, and Cooper waited. Home was where Emma's laughter echoed. Home was where David and Jennifer provided safety and care. Home was love, and Ripley had traveled through storms and shocks and exhaustion to reach it. As darkness fell and stars began appearing over the ocean, Ripley performed her nightly ritual. She swam to the section of the pool closest to the house, surfaced, and made her unique call, that sound that was neither fully seal nor fully dog, but entirely her own. And from the deck 3 golden retrievers answered, their barks blending with her call in a chorus that spoke of family, of belonging, of home. This story is more than just about survival. It's about the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, and how sometimes they don't just share our lives, they save them.